The teenager was even accused at the age of 16 of allegedly assaulting her grandmother. But despite all these warnings, which shouted that everything would explode in the worst way, the mother did not give it the importance it should have, and said that she never imagined that things would end like this. For her, everything that happened was unexpected. After 1 year, in February 2018, the trial against Cassandra Bjorge and Johnny Ryder finally began. American justice formally accused them of the murder of the girl's grandparents. They were also accused of trying to kill Ryder's sister and her boyfriend. During the trial, both teens pleaded guilty to the acts, although Ryder could have faced the death penalty due to their guilty pleas. In April 2017, Cassandra Bjorge, just 17 years old, organized a party among friends at her grandparents' house. Nothing was missing from the meeting: loud music, alcohol, laughter, and many kinds of substances. But that wasn't all. While more than a dozen teenagers screamed and danced uncontrollably on the second floor, something terrible had happened. Behind the door that remained sealed were the young woman's grandparents, while she and her boyfriend, Johnny Ryder, pretended that nothing strange was happening. It all started on April 6, 2017, at 6:91 p.m., when the police showed up at a home on the limits of the city of Suwannee in Lawrenceville, United States, for a welfare check requested by a family member of Randall and Wendy Bjorge, both 63 years old. According to family members, they had tried to contact the couple by phone on several occasions, but were unsuccessful. The police knocked on the door and received no response. As they did not see anything suspicious, they left the place without suspecting what had happened. 1 day later, on 7th April, at 4:40 p.m. and 3 p.m., the authorities again showed up at the home of the elderly. For a second visit, which had been requested to 911 by relatives, the police again showed up at the home, knocked on the door, but no one answered, and they did not see or hear anything suspicious. Just 4 hours later, a 911 operator received another call from a relative of Randall Bjorge about his disappearance, although a week had passed without the elderly couple's relatives hearing from them. The police did not believe they had sufficient grounds to enter the place by force. A day later, the authorities' perspective would change when at 8:30 p.m. they received a report of assault in the same Lawrenceville neighborhood. The notice reported that Johnny Ryder, 19, and his girlfriend, Cassandra Bjorge, had attacked Ryder's sister and her partner inside their home when officers arrived at the scene. They found them both beaten. According to the testimony of the victims, Ryder had attacked his sister with a baseball bat and had sprayed them both with pepper spray, then fled in a stolen car belonging to elderly Randall and Wendy Bjorge. Due to the couple's injuries, police obtained arrest warrants against Ryder just 2 hours later. At around 11 p.m., the police showed up once again at the elderly people's home to investigate the theft of the car. Now the agents had enough reason to break into the home and break down the door. They barely crossed the threshold of the house. A faint but nauseating smell invaded the officers' nostrils. As they went into the house, the stench grew stronger and stronger until they came to the door of a room that appeared to be sealed. When they opened it, they were not only hit by a putrid, concentrated smell, but by a creepy image. The lifeless bodies of Randall and Wendy Bjorge were on the floor of the room, in an advanced state of decomposition. In the first instance, the teenagers were the main suspects in the crime, but they had to be found. The officers knew that to find his whereabouts, they had to follow the clues of the stolen car, and so they did. Through the security cameras in the area, they managed to locate them in an apartment. The officers tried to establish contact peacefully, but the suspects refused to leave barricaded inside the home. Seeing that they were not cooperating, the authorities requested the reinforcement of the SWAT team. After a short period of time, the team specialized in this type of cases entered the house by force. There they came across a disturbing image. Both suspects had self-inflicted wounds on their wrists without wasting any more time. The youths were taken to a clinic in the city to prevent them from losing their lives and could be prosecuted for their crimes. While awaiting the recovery of Johnny Ryder and Cassandra Bjorge, the police began investigating the case of Wendy and Randall Bjorge. Days later, forensic results concluded that the death of the two elderly people had been due to a cut in the throat. But not only that, before they both received the fatal wound, they had been tortured. The autopsy reported blunt force blows and stab wounds on their bodies. Apparently, it had been a crime filled with fury and hatred, in addition to the brutality of his death. Something else puzzled the doctors, and was that the day of death dated more than a week ago, which meant that the teenagers had been living with the bodies of their grandparents under the same roof, as if nothing had happened. The police came to the conclusion that the criminal couple used a hammer, a baseball bat and a butcher knife to carry out the murder of the elderly, and that after perpetrating the horrendous crimes, they put the bodies in a room. At his arrest, Johnny testified how the events were. Instead, the victim's granddaughter preferred to remain silent. The young man related with incredible crudeness how one April night, he and his girlfriend waited hidden outside Wendy and Randall Burke's house until all the lights went out. Once it was dark, they crept into the house. They took the two old men by surprise. There was nothing they could do when Ryder started attacking Randall with a tire in a wild way. Meanwhile, Cassandra dragged her grandmother into the same room, where they later left the bodies. There he taped the old woman's limbs and then beat her to exhaustion. Later, her boyfriend and accomplice took the old man to the room and harassed him on the floor next to his wife. Defenseless in the face of two young people blinded by their evil, they could do nothing when they received dozens of stab wounds and then were mercilessly killed. Finally, they sealed the doors so that the stench released from the bodies did not expand through the home. The days passed as if nothing for the murderers. The victims began to decompose while the teenagers stayed in the home celebrating with their friends. After her terrible act, Cassandra took the trouble to text members of her family so they wouldn't worry about the marriage. The young woman pretended to be her grandmother, saying that everything was fine, but her family did not buy the story. And they soon knew something bad had happened. They could sense it, especially when they tried to communicate by telephone, and neither of the two old men answered the calls. There was no doubt about the coldness of both young men. And the worst and most disturbing of all turned out to be that the grandparents were only their first victims in a list of crimes they had planned to commit against more members of their respective families in macabre ways. They had planned to continue the killing spree. First they agreed to kill Johnny's family, and then Cassandra's mother, but the young man ended up abandoning the plan. Maybe when they realized that things weren't going to turn out the way they expected, they came close to doing the same to the young man's sister and her partner. But the criminal sister managed to escape the attacks and managed to alert the authorities in time. Had it not been for that, the number of victims would have been even higher. The authorities were sure they were dealing with two potential serial killers who hadn't made it just because they couldn't commit more crimes after they were discharged from the hospital. Recovered from their suicide attempt, they were transferred to prison without the right to bail, although both were going to face very harsh sentences at trial. Cassandra Bjorge could not be sentenced to death because the time of the events was a minor. On the other hand, Johnny Ryder did not seem to have the same luck, because at the time of the crime, he was 19 years old, and the district attorney's office could request the death penalty for him after the scandal that shook an entire city. The mother of the teenager accused of participating in the murder of her grandparents spoke to the media for the first time at a press conference, along with her lawyer. The woman, named Amanda Sterling, acknowledged that her daughter had been having behavioral problems in recent years. However, she said nothing could have prepared her for this. According to the woman, Cassandra was a rebellious young woman who threw tantrums when her technological devices were taken away, like any ordinary teenager, but she never imagined that she would commit something like a double murder. Then, between tears and a look of shame, the mother confessed that her daughter was so out of control for the last year and a half that she ended up exhausted and gave up custody of her daughter. So she handed her over to her grandparents. The teenager's mother had hopes that her parents finally managed to appease her without knowing that she was handing them over to her future murderer. Cassandra had been living at her grandparents' house before the gruesome murder. At the same time, she had started dating Johnny Rader. 19 years old, this relationship did not improve his behavior. It only enhanced it to unimaginable levels. The character problems did not stop, and since the young woman had moved to her grandparents' house, the police had received many 911 calls between October 2015 and March 2017. In total, there were 31 complaints to the police for various reasons. 18 times were due to the teenager's escape from home. Others were motivated by domestic disputes between the grandparents and their granddaughter, and even by the suspicion of illegal drugs that the young woman had in her possession. The teenager was even accused at the age of 16 of allegedly assaulting her grandmother. But despite all these warnings, which shouted that everything would explode in the worst way, the mother did not give it the importance it should have, and said that she never imagined that things would end like this. For her, everything that happened was unexpected. After 1 year, in February 2018, the trial against Cassandra Bjorge and Johnny Rader finally began. American justice formally accused them of the murder of the girl's grandparents. They were also accused of trying to kill Rader's sister and her boyfriend. During the trial, both teens pleaded guilty to the acts, although Rader could have faced the death penalty due to their guilty pleas. He was spared the maximum sentence. Finally, and in front of the families of both young people, Cassandra and Johnny were charged with homicide, aggravated assault, armed robbery, and theft. The judge sentenced those sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after serving 60 years in prison, plus about 21 years that they must serve simultaneously with life imprisonment, although the criminals received their sentences in record time. It was never known why they committed such a crime. Authorities believe Bjorge and Rader decided to murder the grandparents because they were basically fed up with them. This has been a case that is full of helplessness and is impossible to understand in situations like this. The only explanation seems to be the evil of the human being, because there is no reason to end the lives of two elderly people who only wanted to help their granddaughter, and in return, you received the worst of betrayals. Once again, it has been a pleasure to be with you.